the main difference I experienced was the people in the group became much shittier. That's what I remember.
That's the other half that I'll definitely talk about too. But yeah.
Welcome to Skip the Dialogue, episode 2, our first episode. We talked about the what the hell did we talk about? You know what? My brain sucks.
What is an RPG?
What is an RPG? Oh, that's the one where we decided that Pong was an RPG and Fable was not an RPG, right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by we, but
arguably.
Both ways.
Yeah, at least Rohan.
Let's see. In this corner decided that anyway. But I want to ask, it's been what, 2-3 weeks since our last recording? What have y'all been up to? What have you been playing? Anyone can go first.
So I have been playing a little bit of EQ2, as ManOfRohan knows.
Yeah.
On the MMO side, that's really the only thing right now. But the other one that I finally started actually, I put a couple hours into now is Solasta.
Okay,
Crown of the Magister. Yeah. Finally, I've had it for ages. I'm finally like really getting into it. So
you decided to get into it right before Baldur's Gate 3 launched, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's actually kind of part of it is I wanted to get in like the mode of, that kind of game again. And it was either that or like Divinity Original Sin 2. And I went with Solasta since that's what the Quest and Coffee crew were playing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's fair. They've been playing it for a while over there.
Yeah.
They say they're having a great time.
That's good. I went in a totally different direction, and I've been playing Remnant 2. Are y'all familiar with that game?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a game I didn't expect to like, partially because I suck at Souls-like games, and I also suck at first-person shooters. And it's kind of both, but not at the same time. It has difficulty settings, but it was it's been a fun game, especially playing with other people, and has surprisingly good story. Like I kind of expected it to be absolute shit, and it hasn't been. It's a solid game for $50, I think. The way that I've kind of been describing it, and this is kind of mean, but I've been describing it as what Redfall was supposed to be. Is kind of how it feels. Yeah. And it costs $20 less. So,
yeah,
it is what it is.
Oh, man. Well, I've been playing a few things. Tears of the Kingdom with my kids. And that's going very slowly, but we're just trying to enjoy it while you have it because, Zelda games don't come around very often.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 16, as we spoke about last, and to my I don't know, happiness, I should say, it has opened up a little bit. It's not quite as on rails as it was up to the point when we recorded last, but or the last podcast, I mean. And then I've gotten back into Mass Effect, so I'm playing from the beginning again.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was on sale. $15 for Legendary Edition, so I said, hey, let's do it. I haven't played it for a while.
I think I got the Legendary Edition for free from Amazon Prime at some point. Like, I think I grabbed it.
Oh, yeah.
I want to get into it, too. I played it back when the first Mass Effect, the second Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm.
I played some of the third one. I never got to the ending that everyone hated because all my friends got to it first and then told me to stop, so I stopped.
I was lucky, and I ended up playing through 3 after they had patched it.
Okay, there you go.
So at least I got a decent set of options at the end. So
I played a lot of Andromeda too, and I know that's no one really likes that one.
Yeah, you're not allowed to like that.
Is that a game? There's an Andromeda game for Mass Effect?
No. That's the one that's going to piss people off more than the whole thing about Fable not being an RPG. Debatable. Speaking of debating, that's kind of where this whole podcast is going, because not only did Des and I start to have our own little debate, before the podcast about dungeons, but when I put it forth to the YouTube audience to vote on what the next episode should be about, it won pretty handily. So we're talking about dungeons in MMORPGs, and the kind of like, to give some origin for this, where it came from. I was so disappointed and pissed off playing some Elder Scrolls Online and how terrible I thought the dungeons were. And Des wanted to defend the dungeons of Elder Scrolls Online when I thought they were essentially running simulators.
Oh, I want to hear it.
So that's kind of what we're talking about here. And obviously, we're not just talking about Elder Scrolls Online. We've all played lots of different MMORPGs and had lots of different dungeon experiences. And yeah, I mean, we're basically just talking about that today. So I think since I've already gotten a couple shots in with the running simulator thing, I feel like I need to toss this to Des and give Des the opportunity to start us off on dungeon. We don't really have a question about dungeons as much as just like, let's just talk about them. And we can start with Elder Scrolls Online.
No, I want to start with Fable real quick. So I'm just kidding.
That's going to become a running thing on this podcast.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because Peter Molyneux actually does have a walking simulator. It's called The Trail.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You just walk and you like pick up things, and you get to a camp and you can like craft a shoes so you can go a little faster, but you're just trying to get to this thing that's however long away. Town or something. I don't know. I never made it very far.
It sounds like an RPG though.
Yeah, actually, you gotta make stuff, and yeah.
That's a great little segue, saying that you didn't make it very far in the walking simulator, because I'm trying to think, what is it's a low level dungeon in EQ, like Blackborough.
Yeah, Blackborough. I mean, Blackborough would be one of the first ones. Yeah.
So Red.
Okay.
If I told you, hey, let's group up and go through Blackborough at level 50.
Okay.
How would that feel to you?
It would feel like a running simulator.
It would, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I think your opinion came about for
but here's
for Elder Scrolls.
So here's the thing though. Elder Scrolls has levels, but they don't mean that much because everything's level agnostic, right? So I was doing the same dungeons that other people are doing.
It's not quite like that. That doesn't mean there's no power increase in ESO.
Hold on. Because I also, after having our little conversation, after how frustrated I was with it, I hopped on my max level character and I ran 2 veteran dungeons that were essentially the same thing. The only difference...
Which ones?
I don't know the name.
It matters. The difference in difficulty of the dungeons varies so much.
The one that the one that I remember, and I was about to get to why, because the main difference I experienced was the people in the group became much shittier. That's what I remember.
That's the other half that I'll definitely talk about too. But yeah.
Because it was there was like I remember like one of the bosses was some big frost astronaut. That's one thing I remember about it.
Spindle clutch or something. I something tells me you were doing something at the top of the list.
I just did random. I said I want to join a dungeon, and I did a random dungeon, and that's where it took me. But this isn't the first time I've played Elder Scrolls Online 2. I played it because I got the key from Keymailer to try the new expansion. And I will say there's a lot of good things about Elder Scrolls Online. Dungeons are just not one of them. The ones that I was in, and it was multiple attempts. So it's like, that is what the game is providing you. It's like, here is your dungeon. It's easier than World of Warcraft has ever been. Have fun.
So, okay. I think you already you hit on the problem, and that is random queuing a dungeon in a modern MMO. And I think people running WoW dungeons would get kind of the same thing with a group finder? Because
No. I would strongly disagree, because I have actually been doing that recently and granted, World of Warcraft running random dungeons, it's not exactly an immersive experience. It is a lot of just following a beaten path. But the way that it builds yourself up, there's more. I felt like there was more difficulty in that than even the hardest difficulty that I was able to do in Elder Scrolls Online, which there isn't anything, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not something above veteran, right? Veteran is the hard difficulty. There's no like mythic or mythic plus in Elder Scrolls.
Not all veteran dungeons are the same difficulty wise. It's kind of like in the original game with levels, you still actually, as you level up your character, you don't have access to all the dungeons all at once. It starts with like the lower ones, like Spindleclad, Sheldon Hollow, and you just like kind of slowly make your way up until you're level 50 CP, 160 or whatever. Then you have access to all of them. But the veteran dungeons do the same thing. The lower level veteran dungeons are a cakewalk, while the higher end ones can be a lot more difficult. But I will completely agree with you in that the culture around PUGs in ESO is like one of the worst I've ever come across, because the game incentivizes you to speed run it. Like literally incentivizes you. Like there's achievements and additional stuff you get from doing these like oh my gosh, I almost said triple triad. There's like achievements and stuff that like, you get better unlocks or whatever if you can like kill the, bosses in a certain amount of time, or I'm totally spacing on the exact details, but like it's literally incentivizing people to do that. And especially if you get in with, folks that are further along in their champion points. Like there is a huge power differential, even if there aren't levels, because the dungeons don't scale to you. That's the thing.
I've got a way to bring ManOfRohan into this, because what it made me think of was agnostic dungeons in Everquest 2. ManOfRohan, did you ever play those in EQ2, where basically you could group with anybody and you could just they added it, I think, like maybe 5-6 years ago into EverQuest 2.
No.
Okay. Well, it's awful.
It is awful. I did one. I played my live character once on a level agnostic dungeon.
It's free experience. It's nothing. It's just, it's not scaled.
I was just thinking it shouldn't be that finishing the dungeon is not the goal of a dungeon. To me. Yes, you want to finish it because you've conquered it. But you went in to get experience and loot and figure things out. You didn't finish the dungeon. Now I've got an achievement. So yes, any incentive to finish a dungeon is going to screw up that dungeon. That's my thought.
Is this the post 2004 paradigm though, right? Because you went from dungeons in EverQuest being kind of, not having necessarily a linear path that you followed, and then you had the beginning and the end. They're built large dungeons, and even in like other older games like Ultima Online, they had multi levels through the dungeon. You weren't finishing that shit, and apart from anything else, if you were trying to finish it, someone's probably going to player kill you anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And the further you got, the deeper you got, the bigger of an issue it was, because you had to go and run to get your corpse. But from 2004 on, and to an extent, EverQuest 2 did this, but early on, EverQuest 2 didn't really. You had Fallen Gate and stuff like that was bigger dungeons, like, so they weren't meant to be completed in 30 minutes. The thing that got me, though, is a World of Warcraft dungeon, which is where you kind of get this idea from. The early ones, they all still took a while, like 30, 40 minutes. The later ones, even like Wrath of the Lich King, going further into now, the dungeons that are available now, they're still like 20-minute dungeons. Like, they're still a decent time. The dungeon I did in ESO took 6.5 minutes, and I freaking timed it because I couldn't believe that that's how short it was. Like that is.
I mean,
so okay, no, I have to joke. So the main like issue that you're bringing up here is like the difficulty, and again, being in a pug group with folks that are trying to knock out the probably 10 plus runs or whatever a day, it's like, again, the incentives are totally jacked. I'm with you on that, and the culture around it is totally jacked. Like people will just straight up, like they'll just run it because they're so overtuned at this point, like they can do that. But I don't know if you ever watched us doing like the 101 MMO 101 for people that aren't over leveled or like people that aren't like super OP already, and like where you actually have to take your time because you'll die. The dungeon design is super good. And that's the thing that like I would stand by pretty firmly. Yes, it's linear, and that's not my favorite. And I'm sure we'll talk about, linear versus, kind of sandbox or open world. But like, besides being, visually appealing, there's some really great like moments of dialogue and fun stuff in there that you won't even get when you're with a pug because they've done this 50 times, but the actual like setup, the fights have some mechanics, etc. But you'll never see that if you're running through Blackborough at level 50.
So let me put it this way. If you design a race course and people race on the race course, is it the people's fault that are racing on the race course, or is it the fact that the course was designed as a race? Because it's pretty as hell. I'm not going to disagree with that. I wanted to know what the hell was going on, and I actually run into this in World of Warcraft too, where I'm like doing a dungeon in World of Warcraft. I'm like, I want to know what the hell this is about, and it's kind of sucks because of the way it's set up in both games, where it's not tied to how you've progressed story. It's just tied to randomizing it. I think Final Fantasy 14
and stuff too. Yeah.
Final Fantasy 14 actually does it in a different way, where you have to have progressed the story to unlock the dungeon, at least for the early parts of the game. I don't know what it does now, but at least that made it seem more coherent. Whereas now that there's no coherence in any of this whatsoever. But it was, I mean, I don't fault the players as much as the game creating the runway for the players to do that and the incentive for them to do that, to just rush through as fast as possible.
Yeah. I bet if you went with folks that were like not geared as much or actually had the will to enjoy what was in front of them, I bet you would have a different experience to actually like see the good parts of it. Especially some really specific dungeons that I've just always like been a huge fan of. But yeah, I'm not going to argue with you that the incentives are totally jacked and that like, having like the oh my gosh, like the daily thing, your 3 dungeons a day. It totally pushes people into that mode. And because you're only going to really have to take your time if you're, maybe you just hit CP 160 and like you don't have great gear and all this, and you're with a group of other people in the same boat, doing the higher end veteran dungeons would, that might be the only point where you see a challenge. And that might just be another fault of ESO, just being that there isn't really a great indicator of power versus like where you should go. Like the game really kind of starts at level 50 CP 160, right? Like, because there's no point in getting gear before that, because it's all like scaled to whatever your level you're at that point. And then at 160, oh yeah. I could boo that too.
It's just gonna become a dissecting ESO.
Well, it's a good example of a lot of problems, and I love that you had a bad experience and that we have such like polar like differences here, because I think it applies to like the entire genre. Like you can like how easily a developer can take a dungeon that was obviously crafted with so much like love and care and completely ruin it by putting incentives in a certain place and totally screwing up like the power curve of players. Yeah.
What do you? Sorry, we've been like really hogging this topic, ManOfRohan.
Yeah. Doggone it. No,
bring us somewhere else.
Well, I think about highly curated dungeons. I'm still a fan of that if the things that are curated are fun. I think of, they're not exactly dungeons, but I think of the things in TOTOR, not the flashpoints, the operations, right? Those are highly curated experiences. Not exactly a dungeon, but you go through dungeon-y things. But you're going through to experience the big fights. You have little fights here and there as you're making your way, but then you're preparing for the cool big fight, and then the loot you get from that, and figuring out the mechanics, like you say, figuring out where to stand, figuring out how to work with a couple of groups, and you go there. We have to solve the puzzle at the same time. I forget which one that was, but that was a really fun operation. And the fun of it is figuring it out, and eventually you figure it out all the way, and it's like, okay, now you can just run it until everyone has the gear they need from that particular one, and that'll happen, yeah. But the curation of it, I certainly don't mind. I don't think everything needs to be a dungeon. I think you have to focus on the reasons for people. Why would people want to go to the dungeon? Mm-hmm. If it is to just run through it, then why the heck have a dungeon? Why even do that? Just make a valley in between two mountains and put a bunch of enemies in it and say, run through here as fast as you can.
That's like such a great example, because I was just about to ask like what you guys prefer as far as like dungeon design. Like I really believe a lot of folks, and this is obvious with, bringing up ESO and even like WoW and all these dungeons that are really, really like finely crafted, that I think, I mean, they'd have to put a survey out. Maybe you should put a survey out, Red, on like, if anyone gives a shit, like what, if it's just, a bunch of loot pinatas from A to B, like maybe that's what most players prefer now. You know?
I mean, I think it depends on, like what ManOfRohan was saying, it really depends on what the goal is. And in pretty much every game I can think of, the goal has always been some sort of advancement, not necessarily experience as much as advancement. And even like if you think back to like you're talking about the valley thing, and there's a thing that happened in Everquest which they've gone away from, but it was big for a couple expansions. I'm not remembering exactly which one it came in, but they were called heroic adventures. Heroic adventures were essentially a straight line to a boss. Like it had different phases. It was like you did have little tasks here and there, and it ended with a massive amount of experience. And then you had a short lockout afterwards, and to the point where it was basically gamified to try and get as many done as you possibly could while your experience potion or your lesson of the devoted was up, just to get it done as fast as possible. It didn't really have a ton of story behind it. There was a randomization element to all of them, where something may or may not happen in the thing, like may or may not get loot. But it was essentially just made to run through it and get the reward. It was to me, it was kind of like taking the reason why people run dungeons now and then just like giving the players exactly what they're doing. Instead of focusing on creating, like crafting a dungeon experience, it was a gameplay experience, because they were still difficult. They were tough. Like you had to, you actually focus when you're going through them, unless you became overpowered, which you eventually did because you had to keep going back to them to level up. But it was this.
All us old people. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just saying, like that's kind of what it came down to. And players actually liked it. A lot of players liked it, and a lot of players were upset when they moved away from it and went to a more open dungeon and then instance area questing type leveling, where you were essentially made to quest to level up. And actually, that's actually what made me quit EverQuest back when I was doing the progression servers. But it kind of like it boiled it down to that. And I don't know like if that works.
Because Pop-Tarts are good. That's why people enjoy it.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, McDonald's is good. I don't care what anyone says.
I would disagree with that.
McDonald's tastes good. I know it's terrible for you, but it tastes good. But that's the thing, is that it's so easy and so quick, and I need to do almost nothing. You know, I'm fighting through it, but I don't have to, I don't have to work my way there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I guess what I would say my ideal dungeon is that not the entire dungeon is curated, but there are curated experiences within a space that I may have to make my way to this area. And then once I figure out how to get through this area, then it opens up another area or maybe a few areas, and then I can work my way through. And it is a progression, I feel, and I think you've had a video about this before, about the struggle in games like this. It always is good, but people still don't want it. I don't know what to say to those people. I definitely do, but there are things that you get used to, like having Pop-Tarts. I want the buy it now button. Everyone does, but it makes society worse. And the old people around here say, looking back, like I remember playing on a private WoW server. In fact, that's the most WoW I actually played, was on a private server. And then I got admin access somehow, and I upped my speed or upped some things, and then I played for literally 2 days more, and I was done. Because I'm like, everything is too easy. Not fun at all. And so there's a point at which there's a tipping point where you can say it's fun to this point, and a lot of the developers out there are gonna push it up to or past that point eventually. And I think that's a big reason why people fall off games, because now they've experienced everything that was super easy. There's nothing more to do. See ya.
So I've got two things here. First, the video that you're referring to is a reaction video of mine to a Josh Strife Hayes video. And with everything going on right now with React content, I tried really hard to make it an ethical reaction and actually like ask his permission and everything. But I just thought it was kind of a very timely thing. The other timely thing, and I want to take your McDonald's analogy here. So I watch a lot of YouTube content, and recently a thing that's been going around with some of the big streamers is something called the Doug Fast Food Challenge, which is the most hedonistic, horrific thing you could possibly do. The basis of it is you go to 10 fast food restaurants and order the food from the people in front of you. So basically adding in RNG like a video game into eating fast food, and you can have 4 people doing it. And so you get up to like 15,000, 16,000 calories. But let me tell you why I'm talking about that with the analogy for dungeons. So for like when you watch those challenges, the first like 4 or so restaurants, they're feeling good. They're eating a shit ton of calories, but it's still like the food, they still are enjoying some of the food. By the time they get to the 5th or the 6th, it's fucking miserable. They hate it. They're dying. By the time they get to the 10th, they can't anymore. It's just awful. And I think that's kind of where we've gotten to at a point where the fast food was great for a little while, but there's too much damn fast food. And so people are frustrated with the fast food and not having anything else. So just having this repeated, regurgitated stuff makes a game like ESO with their race through a dungeon seem frustrating. And then the alternative seems to be to like force yourself into not doing it the way that the game is telling you to do it, because the game is always pushing you, go faster, get more, level more. And then it throws in stuff like login bonuses and all this shit just to keep you playing, because they know that what they have as a gameplay loop is actually kind of shit. And they know that they're just giving you more fast food, and expecting you to just keep eating the fast food, and you're just tired of French fries and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I also have an analogy.
Sure.
that might actually hit even less than the one that you just did. No, I'm just kidding. So lately, one kind of big thing right now, at least in my, I guess, gaming circle, is Path of Exile. Path of Exile.
Yeah.
They just had their Exile Con, bunch of Path of Exile 2 stuff. So it's kind of on my mind, but one huge thing that has struck me recently that ties into this is how we always need the next challenge, but it can't just be the next challenge for the sake of like challenge. Even for me, a person like I do love like just seeing how far I can go. Right. But there has to be this reward ladder, alongside that. And this is, I think, where a lot of games, I would say even ESO included, get this so wrong. Because you end up getting to the point where you can do everything in the game pretty much with basically no effort. But the reward structure comes from doing it multiplicative times rather than challenging yourself. And tying this to PoE, and this is why right now I'm still more into PoE than I am Diablo 4, for example, is I got to like level 70 in Diablo 4, and there's one thing to do, and it can be challenging. Like you can try, do nightmare dungeons, which is like the only thing to do at endgame, basically. And you try to do these 10, 12 plus levels higher than your character. And that's how you get a challenge. But the problem is there is literally no reward for it. You could do this, you could do the easy stuff fast and get more reward. And where this kind of collides is in like PoE, the difference is like most people, I can't remember the stat, and this is why I need to have notes read.
Unscripted.
But most people that play through Path of Exile, most people that don't just like open the passive tree and then quit the game, they don't complete the campaign the first time. They actually fail to complete the campaign. It's literally, it's a majority of people. And the crazy thing, because I'm sure even people that don't play Path of Exile know, like Path of Exile has a crazy end game. Like there's just so much.
I love watching Co-Carnage do seasons of Path of Exile because it just looks ridiculous. Like it looks absurd. And compared to the game of Path of Exile that I played, where like I struggled to kill anything with my little shitty like stick that I had, it's just fun to watch.
Well, like where this is like important is the harder you, and this like Path of Exile really lets you like customize exactly like what kind of challenge you want to go against. But the important thing is it scales the reward. Mm-hmm. And so the people that have amazing builds that are just really know the game, are super optimized, like they're doing the hardest content and they're getting the most rewards. And like people that aren't to that point yet, like kind of look up and they're like, oh man, like one day, like, you see a video of folks that are just getting like just divine orbs, just like constantly, you're like, oh my gosh, but they're in this like tier that's just so far above where you're at. But you have a very clear indicator of like, well, I can do what I am challenged by and get a reward and work that into my character and then get the next challenge, which gives more rewards, next challenge. Like, but you're always like trying to ride that fine line between challenge and meaningful reward. And like ESO totally jacked up there because you don't really get like, it's all set items, right? And they can't, since it all has to be like basically the same level, they can't change that. Like they can't give you better set items for a harder dungeon because that would throw off the balance of the game. So the way they have you build out your character is just by repeating, just repeating stuff that you can do quickly. And so many other games have the same problem. And that is kind of where I see the huge issue in the industry, and especially in MMOs, where we've kind of lost, I guess, that whole, man, I've hit a brick wall. Like I cannot do this, but if I can find a way to do this, I will be rewarded for it. Whereas if I just take the easy mode, I'm not building my character anymore. Like I'm not increasing my progression really. And that's, I think, might be the most important part about dungeons to me in MMOs. It's just, they have to have a challenge, and then they have to have a reward that matches that challenge.
Yeah, I think MMO creators have not learned the lesson of WildStar and the 100 other broken ones after WoW came out with all the WoW clones, They haven't really learned their lesson. They've just kept making them, or they've kept in some of those pieces into their games that failed as a whole, but they were able to sneak them in. I don't know, maybe they're nefarious. All these big game companies working together. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure
they're all making crap games on purpose. it's
it's
part of a cabal.
We're gonna trick those idiots giving us money, Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've learned their lesson. I think until it, and they're not going to until something is successful that's completely opposite, and then they're all going to copy that.
Oh yeah, and I think that's kind of expected. That's what we'll see. And it's funny because there's a lot of games now that I can think of that have mostly avoided dungeons though. And like the ones I'm thinking of, and like they added them in later, but Guild Wars 2, I remember being shocked when I first started playing it because it focused so much on the horizontal progression. Guild Wars 2 didn't really have dungeons when I first started playing, because I started playing Guild Wars 2 at launch. They now have what are they called? Fractals? Is that their
fractals?
Yeah,
you got it.
But that came later, right? Unless I'm like not like misremembering, I hope. But
no, it's exact comparison.
Yeah,
because Guild Wars 2 also has that weird issue where their game is so balanced that like you can't just keep making better and better gear because it throws off like the other parts of the game.
Well, they haven't upped their level cap ever. Like it's still the same.
Right. Like, and you can get slightly better gear, like, the whatever weapons it's like this huge endeavor to like get this
like
weapon.
The legendary or whatever.
Yeah, they're like barely better. I mean, but it's technically an increase. So it's like,
which I think like that's like the interesting part when you look at like Guild Wars 2 and Elder Scrolls Online. And this is kind of devolving into like horizontal versus vertical progression. But in Guild Wars 2, it kind of always has clung to that horizontal progression to kind of make it open and playable, and really accessible. And you can do different things. And like, for example, the PvP actually is like more skill based than or skill and build based. Whereas in Elder Scrolls Online, it's all vertical, and you go into PvP and you don't have the right gear. You're like, it's insta kill. And same thing with dungeons, all vertical. But then Elder Scrolls Online comes in and they're like, hey, we're going to do this kind of leveling thing, but also make it agnostic so that it actually works like horizontal progression. So the entire world is open and you can do whatever, which then like kind of messes up with the chronology of these dungeons where they don't really fit anymore because they did it after the fact. So they had it all as a vertical progression thing. And then a couple of years after launch, they decided to make it all level agnostic. So like even the storytelling gets kind of convoluted. And I think one of the main things that gets lost in these fast dungeons is storytelling, because you're no longer telling a story with a dungeon. You're giving a reward. So the actual story itself in the dungeon doesn't matter. And EverQuest 2, I think, had one of the most aggravating and frustrating dungeons I have ever been in, but I loved it because the story was incredible. Do you have any idea which one I'm thinking of? ManOfRohan.
Could be Nektropos Castle.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
I hated that dungeon so much, but I loved it too.
Yeah, I think of vanilla EQ2 as one of the top games ever that has made dungeons that are both curated, and they've done both, right? They have the curated kind, like Nektropos and Deathfist Citadel, and then they have Black Burrow and Stormhold, and and those more open. Yes, there are quests. Yes, there are things, but I'm solving something with every area I go to, in both, and so I really liked that they had both options. But yeah, Nektropos was great, having to figure out where to put things and the keys and the the
handmaidens and the
kill things,
the kind of backtracking
right
and all that.
Great.
It fell back into the more Dungeons and Dragons type tabletop way you think of dungeons. And I think I'd be remiss here, and I haven't played them enough to talk about it, but I believe DDO, Dungeons and Dragons Online, has that dungeon that way where there's lots of different traps and things like that. I remember doing the tutorial dungeons for it, and it had something similar. I don't know if Neverwinter is the same way, but I know that's another inspired D&D game that a lot of people enjoy, but has like other ways to advance. But it's just like having the dungeon itself be a reward by doing the dungeon, I think is an important thing for us to look forward to. I don't necessarily want to go back to the times of Everquest, because I personally love that, where you went into Velkator's Labyrinth and you just sat in a camp and you killed things for 4 hours. That's a playstyle I enjoy.
But and you didn't go into a dungeon. You went into a place,
an open dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, technically it's a dungeon, but you're not like running a dungeon. Like
no, I actually hate running dungeons.
Yeah, you're going and you're just going to a place that is a lot more difficult. And that's to me that's what makes dungeons more fun, is that it's more difficult. I have to think about what I'm doing. We have to be placed properly. We have to watch out for this roaming whatever. We have to watch out. And there are other groups around. Those that can be fun too. The open dungeons.
That can be fun.
It is fun. When you think about it in retrospect, it is fun because doggone it, they stole my whatever. But I stole theirs next time. So whatever. But you went and you sat in a place, like you said, you had a camp, and that is fun. To have a camp, because you're going there for XP and for experience with the mobs and with the group you're in, and hopefully you can move on, because you're like, camp check, you're trying to get to a camp that you want to get to, because that's probably camped already, but if you are running a dungeon, if you said it's good, or you like I'm trying to remember your words you just said a minute ago, and that was completing the dungeon, or going to the dungeon for the dungeon's sake. I'm totally misquoting you.
Basically, yeah.
But if you're doing that, I disagree with that a little bit, in saying, hey, I want to go to this dungeon because of the dungeon. If it's something like Deathfist Citadel, sure. But that also was the ending of some pretty cool quest lines. To finally kill Emperor Fist at the end.
Spoilers.
Well, if you can, he's epic again.
I was about to say, we just did it, so it's probably, fresh on our minds.
I think you can on a certain server.
On a certain server.
Kale Dracal.
No, Varsity.
No, Varsity.
I'm saying, but you can do whatever you want.
You can solo it on Kale Dracal.
Yeah.
But no,
go
ahead, Des.
I might be kind of trailing us off a little bit. So if you had a thought for this, you should probably go for it.
Well, I have ADHD, so I've kind of forgotten my thoughts. So go for it.
So, okay, we've kind of gotten into the expected, like, open world versus instance linear versus, the kind of storytelling versus sandbox, right? And one huge thing for me, because there's a lot of feelings when it comes to dungeons. And as you guys are kind of talking about, like, camping, I love camping sometimes. Sometimes I love the linear storytelling thing.
Mhm.
And that's like, that's one thing that I've really enjoyed about ESO when I did take the time to go through those dungeons, you know, in that way. That's why they strike me as some of my favorite. But there's no camps in ESO. And having only one part of that, like, pizza bothers me so much. And I realize my favorite games have all of them.
Mhm.
And that's probably why I'm enjoying EQ2, is because you've got open world, you've got places that not quite camps like EQ, like where you literally sit in one place, but you kind of dope around the same little spot.
Mhm.
You've got the storytelling, like fully instance bits, but like one of my favorite ones is just where it's like mostly open world, and then you've got an instance at the end, like Ruins of Arsun.
Mhm.
But one great point that that ManOfRohan brought up was like, the fun part about some of these is that they're open world dungeons, but they're a part of a quest. Like it adds a certain amount of like reality where like you could just go and kill names and stuff, but then like if you wanted to, or you know that there is a reason to kill some of these named or go to these certain places, even if you don't have like the quest or whatever, it kind of has a little bit of like solidity. Like it makes it feel like a world, even if I'm not approaching it in that way. And that's very different than speedrunning dungeons, because you have to be so intentional about that. Whereas in like EQ2, even EQ1, and you know, a lot of the older school, I'm going to say it, Vanguard, like
drop the Vanguard. There you go.
You can kind of dwell. You can just kind of dwell. You can just show up if you want, or you can take the other route, and it's like you're literally talking about the same dungeon, but you can approach it in multiple different ways, and that is so important to me, I think.
I think like listening to everything you're saying, it kind of crystallized a thought in my mind of how, and I'm going to bring up Remnant 2 again here in a sec, but how when you have an end goal, the way that, you know, humans are going to react is to go towards that goal. And I think gradually what's happened is that end goal has become a singular goal instead of multiple goals in one place. And it's been the finish line has just been moved up and up and up, so you can see the finish line. And if you can see it, you're going to sprint towards it. 6.5 minutes of sprinting to get your reward in ESO, versus going into a large dungeon which has multiple different goals in it. You know, talking about finding different camps and things like that. You will have a different goal here and there. Or Nektropos Castle does have a end goal, but you can't see it. It's far away, and you may not even get to it before you have to leave. You know, it's. I think that's something.
You got 3 days.
You got 3. That's yeah, 3 days. So it takes time, and you don't see it. So there doesn't. I don't think there's the sense of urgency to get through it, because it's not like, oh no, I can finish this in 10 minutes, or I can finish this in 20 minutes. It's, I can have fun for 20 minutes and then finish it another time, or I get something out of it for 20 minutes. And I think that the Remnant 2, which is a weird place to go to for saying dungeons, because they have what you call...
it makes sense to me.
They have worlds, right? They have these big worlds, and each of the huge worlds, I think there's 4 of them right now, they have their own little branches off and things like that. There's mini bosses, there's clues, there's like story you have to uncover. There's creepy shit everywhere. It feels a little bit like Resident Evil in some places, where you're just like uncovering secrets, but you're also advancing. Like you're progressing as you're doing things, and it's non-linear. Like you can branch off in different directions and still eventually end up in the same place. But whether you choose to go right or left, you're going to find something to the right that helps you and something to the left that helps you. You'll have to do both eventually, but you get the choice of which one to go to. And they're huge. Like they surprised me with just how long it was. I think when I played with my friends, we spent about 6 hours straight in one world, and that branches off into different things, but that was 6-hour dungeon essentially, because it was all like one confined area. But I think that kind of not having the end goal be this quick, and then still having all like the little things that are bringing you joy or dopamine, like getting a level or getting items or getting something. I think like ManOfRohan was saying, going to a dungeon just for the dungeon's not like a good enough thing. There has to be reason to. And for like a single player game, you're advancing the story. Usually in an MMO, you're advancing your character in some way. But I think having smaller little hits of dopamine versus just the big hit at the end, which if you think about ESO, you think about World of Warcraft, what is the main point of doing like the dungeon run? You get a big ass bonus of experience at the end of it. Like you get stuff during it, but by completing it, you win. That's kind of like how it's designed.
Yeah, I like what you said about having like the finish line so close that you just sprint towards it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes, I think I completely agree with that. And it's funny you mentioned like just the size of the Remnant like world, because to me, the size of the dungeon really matters. Like to me,
size matters. Is that the name of this fucking podcast today?
Yes. Apparently
it's the name
it
of the
is
episode.
Now. But I mean, I have doted a billion times about like certain dungeons in like Vanguard just because they were so massive. And like, I mean, Vanguard dungeons, they're not really that special in the sense of like density of detail. You know what I'm saying? But just because they're like so sprawling and you would have different goals each time you went in, it's like, okay, we're going to try to make our way towards this room or this boss or, try to finish this quest or whatever. And you end up revisiting and you end up developing this real like sense of place. And it really ties you to a location to be like, I'm going to want to go back there. I want to, spend time there rather than it is the, means to an end. And being intentional about it too, because the other side of ESO that's like kind of garbage and ruins their dungeons is the whole incentive to random queue. Because, you have your dailies, you do your 3 undaunted things a day and to get, your big bonus at the end, right? And it's like, you're literally hitting a random button, as in you're basically signing a waiver saying, I really don't give a shit where I go.
Yeah.
Like the next 6.5 minutes don't matter to me at all,
And none of those people are friends at the end. Probably not.
No. And if they do talk, it's probably saying we're going to kick you because you're not doing anything.
And I think that's part of how it's the design, not so much like, because there's 2 things, right? Because dungeon finders in general have been widely maligned across the entire MMO space, and yet they still exist because people still use them. But I think part of that is because the way dungeons have been designed is to incentivize speed and knowing your shit. And if you don't have those 2 things, then it breeds this like toxicity and you not being good enough to be part of that dungeon, instead of just like making it so that, communication's important and making it so like you can slow the fuck down and actually enjoy the dungeon. And that, I think, leads to people enjoying spending time with each other and doing something social, because again, that damn finish line isn't staring you in the face, and you're not seeing this person who's new to the dungeon holding you back from getting to the finish line.
Yeah.
Because what it feels like then is you are being weighted down by someone who doesn't know. So then you don't want to be friends with that person. It's because they feel like an obstacle, more of an obstacle, because you're being shown that the best way to do this in the game is the most optimal way possible. Min-max your dungeon runs, not just your gear, but min-max the dungeon runs to get them done as quickly as possible.
There's room for there's room for all of that, I think. Mm-hmm. Dare I say they should both exist.
I was about to say that too. Yeah.
I think there should be a wham bam kind of experience.
Mhm.
You know, for one thing, because people enjoy it. Obviously, people do. And just like you said, we can't have a full diet of that, or else it gets too much and we're going to hate it. You know, but if you balance it, if you've got the open world, I've got to go and really fight my way through so many things. If you've got the storied instance, if you have the the race to the end, the dungeon run, all three of those and more. I'm sure there's more things that no one has thought of because we're so stifled by saying we have to do it this way or else we're not going to make any money. You know, we have to do it this way. And so then no one's thinking of anything super cool. You know, there's got to be cooler things out there to have fun with than just what we've experienced so far. But, you know, human flourishing is going downhill because we're all relying on one stupid thing that got created that no one can seem to. You know, we got so many remakes of movies. Old guy's talking right now. You know, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. Is that we've lost that ability, or game companies have, and here I am complaining about it because I know I can see the fun in all of them. Why don't we just have them all?
I'm running into that so much right now. And I think I've brought this up to like 3 people at this point since we've like started like trying to play EQ2. Is like, why EQ2, even though it disappoints me in like 7 different ways every time I log in? It's because it serves like the entire spectrum of things that like moods that I have, I guess I should say. It hits every different corner. Like we just talked about, they have open world dungeons, short instances, long instances, ×2 raids, ×4 raids, like collections, you know, crafting, it's just everything. And there are other games out there that are very one-dimensional. Or the obviously optimal way to do things is, you know, this. And so doing anything else feels like wasting time. But I do think we need that spread of different stuff because, okay.
We need variety.
We need variety.
Yeah.
But we also need a mixture of feelings. So one thing when ManOfRohan was talking, that kept coming up to me is like, for some reason, I'm thinking of EQ2 so much today, but like they're about to hit Rise of Kunark 4th expansion for EQ2, and I have some really fond memories of that expansion and specifically dungeons. And what's funny is I have overlapping memories of feelings with those dungeons between struggling through them with people, enjoying, you know, the story or whatever, and then also being in that super optimized group where you're just locked in and like everybody knows what's, you know, the mechanics, everybody knows exactly what to do. Like, and you basically, you know, you don't even need to talk anymore because everyone is just like in the zone. I like both of those things.
Yeah.
And that's just in the dungeon side.
And the benefit to having a mixture is that if you must, and as long as they're equal, right? If it makes more sense to always do the wham bam version, then you're not going to really get people to go to the other ones. But if they're all equal reward, equal whatever, as far as incentivizing people to go to them, then those ones that take longer, you're going to meet people. And then for the ones where you have to know the mechanics perfectly, those people that you've made friends with are going to help you. Probably because you're friends with them. You've become friends with them because of the other experience you've had. And now you can get optimized and not just get killed every 5 seconds like in Battlefront. You know,
there has to be a spectrum of skill, right? Or progression at least, where, you know, you can experience sucking at a dungeon and then being great at it later. Which I think has been kind of pervasive through this whole talk, is that a lot of our examples don't have that. You just kind of like show up at this certain point and then suddenly like 80% of the content is a cakewalk. but I think everybody, if you don't have this experience, I wish you did. To the people that are listening to this, if you don't have like a tank on your friends list that's like you've just grown to trust them like more than a spouse because you go and do a dungeon and they just know, and like you're just locked in. But then you also have a buddy that walks in the door before the tank and AoEs everything and just, always causes chaos. Like because I know he's not going to listen to this, right? But
now Renee, a comment from Grak.
But because both of those things serve their purpose in if the setting is created for that. Again, if the finish line isn't right there, so that you feel like, man, this guy, I'm never going to group with him again because he's making it so I can't get my fix. That's not good.
It's in a lot of games, it's so gamifying to do it as efficiently as possible, to where that I think makes it so that the rushing and the not wanting to do anything with that friend. And I think like it's funny because playing MMOs for most of my life, I have been kind of scared of being that person. And so that means like when I'm playing Remnant 2, I suck. Like I am bad. But my friends don't mind. They at least they don't tell me they do. And so they just carry me along. I'm the person who's dying all the time and they kind of save me. And I think it's because there isn't this sense of urgency, like we have to get this, and this done today because it resets tomorrow. And then tomorrow we have to do it again the exact same way. So it's like all these systems that are going together, like forcing you to just optimize the dungeon run as fast as possible. And I think that's we're basically reiterating the same points at this point. But
well, it's good that it's clarifying, right?
Yeah,
it's making a really clear picture of like why a similar experience, at least like the moment to moment experience that should be good, is made bad. Like,
I think we're doing a better job this episode than the RPG when I still don't know what the fucking RPG is.
Oh my God, this is totally a side note. But I think it actually does tie in. So there's this video, I haven't watched it yet, but the title and thumbnail totally stood out to me. And because I'm sure a lot of us, have the same YouTube homepage, other people have seen it. But the title is like RPGs, it was never about role playing, or something along those lines. And I cannot wait to watch that because it already triggered so much in my mind about like people have different reasons for playing stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people at least are acclimated to the 10-minute dopamine hit, right? But that doesn't mean they can't actually still enjoy the longer term benefits of, the games that we're used to, if they acclimated to those, which would also give the other benefits that we're all like attached to from the games that we love, that you'll never see in these modern games because the incentives are all screwed up. Anyway.
That's fair.
Agreed. And now it's over because we all agreed.
Yeah,
we can't argue anymore.
Is. Yeah, how dare we all agree? Wait, no, but Des, I think I kind of like pulled you towards my side though on the ESO dungeon thing. That's what it feels like anyway.
Oh, I still fully believe if you took your time through the dungeon and like actually tried to enjoy it,
ZeniMax needs to make me.
You need to group with people. You need to group with people that suck. That's really.
I suck enough for everybody. That's
you need to replicate yourself. You need to
replicate myself.
You just be around. I'm serious. Like I would love to do dungeons with you, like in the right setting. But again, like the problem still arises that we've like talked about. But like again, like the experience of the dungeon, if you're allowed to experience it. like I still believe is really top notch.
Oh, and I can totally
yeah.
imagine that, because when I talk about the good of Elder Scrolls Online, it always comes down to the questing, the voice acting, the stories. I mean, I still like when I'm working on a first impressions for ESO, and I was kind of amazed that I signed a contract with a Dremora. Like it was really freaking cool, like all the stuff that you get to do. And I can imagine how they apply that to the dungeons. It just sucks that ZeniMax at one point decided, let's make them like WoW. Actually, let's double up and make them worse than WoW dungeons. And I think that's how it should end.
And it has nothing to do with the dungeon. That's the thing. You can break
Fallout
dungeons.
76.
Oh no.
Well, Bethesda did anyway.
Yeah, different studio, but yeah. That isn't that amazing though. That maybe that can be the punchline, is you can completely ruin a dungeon with things completely unrelated to the dungeon. Like, anyway, that was a great talk though. I feel like I feel more mentally clarified.
I feel like I want to go play EQ2 right now.
I me too.
Just gonna go play Nektropos Castle.
No, we're too high for it.
Yeah, that's like the one we didn't do. We were like,
you didn't do it?
We've all done that enough times.
That's fair, yeah.
We put in our time.
I want to go play some Remnant too.
Awesome.
All right, that'll be it for the podcast. Anything y'all have going on for you? I mean, obviously, Everquest 2.
Yeah, the Plus group, the Pantheon Plus community, is trying to get stuff going in EQ2 on the Varsoon server. So if you have any interest in EQ2, especially if you want to play on the TLE or are already playing on the TLE, a good group of us are kind of taking our time because we want to experience the content. But we're trying to get people together into a guild, or at least, you could check our Discord. We have a EverQuest 2 channel now, just because it seems to meet a lot of our needs. And so far it's going really good. We've got 2 groups doing EQ2 right now. The MMO 101 on Tuesdays on Twitch, Pantheon Plus Twitch, and the MMO 201, which is our group, the better group, on YouTube, Pantheon Plus YouTube, and that's again on Thursdays. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure this will go up after, after we do our next one.
Oh, I'm sure.
But yeah, we're really trying to actually enjoy the game. So if you want to go along with us, that'd be amazing.
ManOfRohan?
Having a lot of fun there. Oh, same, really. And slowly writing songs. So that's it.
Which, if y'all don't know, the intro and the outro are written by none other than ManOfRohan, and they're freaking amazing, and I love them.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much, and we'll be back next month for another episode where we will be much more contentious and agree much less.
Yeah, I'm already working it up.
Yeah, I'm going to find something shitty to say about EverQuest 2. Just wait.
Here it comes.
There are things, but we'll save it. We'll save it.